Hello and welcome to the Infinite Imaginarium. Uh, Tonight, the magnetic triads of the heart, brain connection. Uh, I am Tech Lords, your host, and as co-host, Nikki, aka Cartman One, will be present. We also have in the room Seek Gnosis. Uh,
Hello.
Hello, Seek. How's it going?
How's it going, boss? Doing good.
Good. So while we wait for Nikki, I wanted to get your uh, impression on the title of the show tonight. Do you have impressions on the title?
Actually, it did take me very well because it's the union of all of them that actually affects the reality around us, and it's very gripping. I can't wait to hear what everyone has to say.
Yeah. Well, actually, Nikki's going to do a lot of the talking tonight. So, uh, who do we have now in the room?
Oh, this is Melissa.
Hello, Melissa. Nice of you to join us.
Yeah, it's nice to be here.
We're live right now.
Okay.
So, you asked for the title of the event. I gave it to you. Your impressions?
Oh gosh, nothing yet. I was wondering if I could maybe listen in a little bit before I decide.
Yeah, sure, sure, no
What
problem.
was about?
Just mute your mic if you're not talking, um, so we don't have any feedback.
Okay, I don't know how to do that.
It's on top of the screen. Cool. So we're still waiting for Nikki. She's the one uh, who has all the knowledge on this for this show. So we'll
I
have to wait, I guess. But maybe Signosis, maybe you should try and give a little bit of your point of view on um, the connection of the heart, uh, the brain, whatever you think is relevant to this show. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, honestly, this opened up a whole new field for me because I am fascinated with the study of the subconscious mind and the superconscious mind. Um, So by hearing the title, I started to look into the connections between those and the heart, and it's interesting how it all falls into a magnetic field, and it would appear that once you can harmonize all of them, then you can realize your true potential in it. Something that's obviously quite difficult to achieve, but it's a rabbit hole that I've been looking into now since I heard this, and I have been pretty inspired.
Interesting, very interesting. Oh, who is this?
no, that's just
That's your picture. Okay, sorry, I thought somebody else was in the room.
no. I just took the video camera off.
Okay, cool. I love your light bulb.
Thank you.
Anyway,
So is
so I'm noticing that Nikki is having internet problem right now, but she keeps going on and off from um,
from
from
the
Skype. So I'm still waiting. Uh,
so Tech Lords, is that Psychnosis?
yes,
Yes.
Oh hey,
Hi, Melissa.
how are you?
Doing
I
all
don't.
right.
I was just looking at your a Precious Destiny, and I didn't recognize that. So, but
Oh,
I recognize your voice. So, actually,
apparently.
what you were talking about, the actual subject that I read, I was posts and posts ago about this conscious, superconscious, and subconscious. Um, I read a book called Huna, 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 and it is a Hawaiian philosophy of life. And of all the brief philosophical books I've read, or different, you know, schools of thought, that was most closely I related to so much in that. I don't know if you've ever heard of Huna. There are many
No.
books out there about it, and I couldn't find the book I read, but I was looking online for just that one because it was so well written, and I couldn't find it again. But it's Huna. And have you ever heard of that? Either one of you?
Not I.
No. It very definitely has many chapters on the three modalities of the mind: conscious, subconscious, and superconscious. It very specifically dealt with that, and I hadn't heard any other philosophy on that. Maybe Cartman has different awarenesses of that. But do you think the different aspects of your brain relate to or function to communicate with, say, maybe your conscious is your body, and your subconscious, no, your subconscious would be your, in the Huna was your body, all the autonomic functions. It actually takes care of everything. And then your conscious obviously is your ego, and your superconscious is connected to your spirit. Does that sound right?
Sounds
Well,
pretty.
So different aspects or different dimensions of you function and communicate through different aspects of your brain. Your brain's not just one thing. Your brain is multidimensional too. Does that sound right?
Essentially, I've always viewed it as if the brain does divide itself into three functions. The consciousness being the observer, so to speak, the person that is um, aware of his surroundings, be it internally or externally. The subconscious being the one that has stored all of the information or beliefs that one has acquired since the womb, basically. And the superconscious to be that direct link to the vibrational patterns of the universe that can actually sink into the perfect you, the perfect, the right answer to your questions. It's
Yeah.
finding a way. Mhm.
So they're all functioning at the same time, I believe. And what people call this whole ever since I heard the word junk DNA, and you know, we only use 10% of our brain. I don't care what the scientists say. That never sounded right to me. I think we're using more of our brain than we think we are, because your whole subconscious and your whole superconscious are all, there's all brain function going on there, but it's the ego and the conscious of I'm sitting here in this chair that blocks out that what's going on back there. It's like a monkey in your head on a wheel. And he's doing all kinds of crap back there, and you just don't know he's there. You know, and it's like you you don't ever get to talk to him directly.
I think that that's the key. I've honestly always been fascinated on that subject, and I've studied the way people follow their religions and their beliefs in that very sense. I think it's more that it teaches you a scientific approach to communicate with your subconscious and actually give a direct message to what you want to receive and what you want to accomplish. Um, Religion gives you it through strict doctrine and certain rituals or disciplines that they do. Philosophers would rationalize it. But there's always being able to calm yourself and be aware that you're the observer connecting to information on such a higher level that you can draw from. It's a matter of trying to actually calm yourself and find a way to communicate with that directly.
So you believe you can communicate with it directly, or just be aware, because your conscious mind is what translates the messages coming through. So you, well, I kind of did that in the jungle. I kind of cut off my conscious with through the ayahuasca experience I had. I did realize that there were, you know, you would think of if almost dying and having your consciousness knocked from you, that you would be unconscious, but I wasn't, and I didn't find any difference in my ability to think or walk around or move. There was no difference in my brain. I wasn't like a different person or anything, but I could actually hear my body speaking to me. So it actually knocked that conscious part out. It just, poof, you're unconscious now. So through my unconsciousness, I was actually able to hear the other two layers, the subconscious, which was body connection, and the higher self, which was basically consoling my lower self. So it was a very strange experience to have actual direct communication with my subconscious in such a visceral way through my body. I could hear it speaking to me. And I thought it was just a strange, weird, it was from the psychedelic panel we had. I thought it was just a weird, strange thing that I went through. But when I reflected later on that panel show and what I'd gone through, I was thinking that when I grabbed my legs or my feet, that I was somehow having a revelation to myself, which I was. But then I realized how many other people on this planet also have never experienced that direct connection with their bodies. And so it's the conscious mind. I don't know how, maybe Carmen, I think maybe she just jumped on. Carmen? Yeah, there she is.
Hang on.
Hello, Nikki.
Actually,
Hello.
Hey, Nikki, it's Melissa.
Sorry, my system's being a nightmare at the moment. I'm trying to log into things and log out of things, and it's... Oh, hang on. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, we can hear you.
Hang on.
as to what you were saying, Melissa,
Mhm.
that is very interesting, because essentially I feel it's as if your subconscious mind, which I said stored all of this information, it's always keeping in preparation,
It's a computer.
keeping vigilance on your survival in the background.
Yes, it does that, and it's also a big computer. It
Yeah.
stores everything you've ever seen, thought, touched, and experienced, and it stores all the impulses in your body, all the nerve endings, every time you've ever been stubbed your toe, every time you've ever tightened up your body when someone says something mean to you. You know, it's like all those memories are stored in your muscles, in your nerve endings, and that's where a lot of emotions come from, because your subconscious reverberates into your body. What people call feelings or emotions are not really feelings. Feelings are of the heart. What emotions are mental constructs that reverberate energy into your body, and so you feel something in your stomach, or you feel something in your head, or you feel nervous, or you feel happy, or all emotions are mental, where feelings are heart-based. So when I actually experienced direct communication, like I said, with my body, it was like I came to understand. It was like I feel bad. I feel blessed for having that experience, but what if everyone on the planet's like that? What if nobody is really, maybe through meditation? And that's when Cartman came on, when I started talking about meditation, because maybe that's a way to access the subconscious.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Melissa. The bit that I heard, yeah, I've got to apologise. I tried to sort of get into the conversation, but my system kept buffering and being annoying. But yeah, picking up on what you said, Melissa, we always think in terms of our brain starting off a thought process, and then obviously an emotion occurs because of it. But in actual fact, the heart is what has its own intelligence. In a sense, it has its own feeling center. So obviously we have our emotional feelings. The heart is sort of like literally in the center of the body, and it sends messages to the brain, in a sense. So our feeling sends a message to the brain, and then you have like a a process where the brain sort of fires out electrical energy, if you like, or electrical sort of alert signals to the rest of the body. So if you're feeling emotional in the sense of, oh God, I'm always not feeling very well, or I'm not a very lucky person, or it could be to do with physiological illnesses. You could be thinking, oh, if I go on this holiday somewhere, if I go somewhere, then I'm bound to become ill because I always do. And then obviously your emotion sends out that signal to the brain, and the brain then sends messages to the rest of the body, telling the body that it's ill or that it's got a physical ailment, and then obviously that then manifests as a physiological illness. So this whole thing that people talk about in the New Age movement about the law of attraction and manifestation, that all stems from the emotional status of a person. So whatever emotions that you're feeling on a daily basis is what then sends out those messages to the brain, and then in a sense like a hologram, you then project that thought process, which is what you then see as your reality, or you decode as your reality as what we would determine as an external thing going on around us, if that makes sense. So what we decode as separate people, events and scenarios and things that happen in our world and how we perceive things stem from the emotional center.
Well, I've got two questions or thoughts about that. When I was talking about emotions, for some reason in my mind, I separate emotions and feelings as two separate things.
Right, yeah.
And to me, it feels like they can coincide. Like you said, almost sounds to me from what you were saying, I was thinking, well, heart-generated emotions kind of come from the heart center first. They go up to your head and you translate what it is that you are experiencing through love or something like that. And then it can reverberate back down into an emotional mind body. But the other one I was talking about was things like fear and hatred or anxiety that comes straight from your brain. It's not originating in your heart. So that's why I didn't call it a feeling.
Right.
At first. There are things that are feeling generated that are emotional, and there are things that are emotional that you feel. Like two separate things. One comes from the top down, one comes from the bottom up. Have you ever heard that concept before?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a bit more of sort of a deeper complexity to all of that. The whole thing of the heart and the brain linking up together.
Mm-hmm.
And also there's something else to take into consideration. It's not necessarily something everybody would want to take on board or would resonate with necessarily, but you have something within you that you can call it in a cache. It's kind of like a DNA. Not everybody would necessarily refer to it as in a cache, but it's like the DNA within the body, and it's everything, in terms of any previous existences, or what we would call past life existences.
Are you talking about Akashic records?
Yeah, Akashic. You've got the Akashic record of the planet, but you also have each individual soul, each individual human being, human vehicle, or rather the soul as opposed to the physical body. Because obviously each human being can vary in the sense that they could have different soul aspects collected in the DNA or recorded in the DNA. So in each individual soul, you have something called an Akash, which is like the individual soul's recorded experiences within the DNA. So what often happens is, in a existing life, there can be reruns of a program, for want of a better word, of things that may have have occurred in a previous existence or a previous lifetime, if you like, on this planet, and that can often be something that is perhaps the person unconsciously going into their DNA and taking out an experience, not necessarily, you know, in this lifetime they're thinking, I don't want this, I don't really want to experience this, or I'm not really enjoying it, but for some reason I keep going over and over it.
Which is subconscious, which would connect with the subconscious.
Yeah.
So
did that make sense?
Sorry,
I know I've got to go around the house.
For some reason, I don't want to go into the water. I hate the water, but I've never drowned. I've never had a problem with it, but some reason I don't like it, and it's like past lives or past experiences or DNA connection with someone drowned or you drowned, or, you know, and you're having memories of that, which I believe that if you don't, well, I don't know if that would be considered karma, but is there a way you can?
That's right.
Is there a way to clear those past connections, or are they of a benefit to you? I mean, do you want to clear them? It's hard to, you know, you have to almost disseminate the information as to, is this me now or was that me then?
In each lifetime, before we come in to an existence, we have certain desires. Now, when we talk about a desire, it always sounds like something that we want necessarily, but in between, you know, the incarnation, where we are before we incarnate, when we make that decision about who our parents are going to be and the experiences we're going to have in that particular lifetime, there's no difference between what we would term as a positive experience or a negative experience. It could be either or. They're sort of equal, you know, they're just experiences. So quite often what happens, somebody selects several experiences, they come in, they incarnate as a baby, and they obviously grow up and they go through their experiences. Quite often what happens, before somebody passes on in that life or passes away, they sometimes feel unfulfilled in the sense that they haven't carried out all the things that they wanted to experience in that particular lifetime. So usually what often happens is they have a blueprint where they come into the third dimension or third density, and there's certain things that happen that are beyond control. So there's no such thing as law of attraction, the creation stage, because that's more of a higher level of consciousness anyway, when you can, you know, when you start to become what they call a creator or co-creator of existence. So anyway, going back to the fact that people pass on and they haven't quite experienced everything, so what happens is they then want to experience the things that they didn't quite experience in that life before they died. So they say, well, I did X, Y, and Z, but I didn't quite do that. So what happens is they jump back on the wheel of reincarnation, in a sense, because they haven't carried out all their desires. It could be that they didn't quite manage to have children, or it could be that they didn't quite manage to experience a particular illness or an ailment. I want to experience having that illness, or I want to experience having that fear, i.e., you know, fear of water, or I want to experience drowning, or I want to experience. See, it could be something that they have, and it could be a feeling or an emotion that they had a desire to experience, what, you know, before they incarnated, that they added into their list, that is attached to that experience of being in the water and feeling scared, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So quite often what happens is people will then die, come back again, and they're on this sort of, they keep getting drawn back to this feeling on this neuro pathway that they've created, this program.
That's above, so below, right? In this lifetime, how many people do you know date the same guy or same girl over and over and over again? Because it's like,
and they say, I don't understand what it is. I've left this person, this complete tosser. I've now met this new one, and they're exactly the same. What's going on? Or it's like they keep going to the same job, same set of circumstances, slightly different format, different people, but the same people keep cropping up, and they're trying to get away from it. Is that what you mean?
I think yes, and the same complaint over and over again. It's like, maybe you haven't learned the lesson yet. And it's funny
Yeah,
because it sounds like on
exactly.
a micro macro scale. But what happened to the guys? Are they still here? Speak up, guys.
Well, yeah, I have a different view on that. I had certain experiences that led me to understand how it all works. And my view on this is that uh, before the soul incarnates, the soul is heavily influenced by specialized entities that guide the soul uh, to go in a certain direction in their experience on the planet. So the influence is very heavy, and but the soul is so anxious to come back because there's 5 times more soul, no, 4 times more souls in the astral world than there is here on the planet. So the lineups are long, and the average wait, according to what I learned, was 800 years.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Why are you laughing?
We're screwed. No, I'm only joking. I'm
It's
joking.
hilarious, but I'm just wondering. Of course, time and space are perceived different on the other side.
I know, but in Earth time, it's 800 years.
Wow.
Because time on in the astral world is not really time. It's a mode of transportation. So when you die and you go in that tunnel, it's a time tunnel.
Okay, let me ask you then, if that is true, if that's your belief and that's true, then what about hundreds and hundreds of people across the world saying, in my past life I was an Indian, American Indian, and before that I was in Egypt, and before, literally, 10 years apart from dying to rebirth, 10 years. So do you think the waiting line has gotten longer, or all these people are delusional when they believe they've lived 5 lifetimes in 500 years?
I did mention an average of 800 Earth years.
Right.
There are people who will come back within 10 minutes.
Oh wow.
Other people.
There are exceptions to the rule.
That's an average. That's an average.
How do those people get to the front of the line?
Well, it all depends on these guides. Usually, a soul has 2 guides to prepare the life plan, but it cannot. It is not imposed on the soul, so the soul must agree to the life plan. But the soul is so anxious to come back, they'll sign just about anything. And everything in life is programmed in advance. This is what we quote unquote call destiny or life plan or astrological program.
I always call it blueprint. I always use the term like the blueprint of somebody's life in the 3rd dimension. There's certain things that cannot be deviated from. So that's when the kind of the law of attraction gets a little bit confused.
The soul can have desires for certain experience, but if it doesn't fit with the need of the soul for certain experiences, the desires are going to be put aside for more practical reasons because of that heavy influence by these specialized entities that take care of the soul that has to prepare the life plan. And once it's agreed upon, before they incarnate back, all they do is study nonstop their life plan. But what's ironic is that the soul, as soon as it incarnates, most of the time, 99.9% of the time, you're allowed only a new memory. There are exceptions, especially in children below the age of 7. There are children, I've seen stories of children in India like 4 or 5 years old, and even in the States, remembering their past life. And those remembrance are privileges. They're called privileges because um, it's part of their programming of their life plan. But I'm going to let you guys talk a little bit because I'm going a little far here, but it's a fascinating subject.
No, I've actually seen a little boy. I think he was in Ireland, and he took his family to another small town in Ireland and described the house he lived in and the family. And he would say to his mother, "You're not my first mother."
I've,
Yeah, I've read that story too.
Yeah.
There seemed to be like a sort of an explosion of lots of these children. They all seem to be around the same sort of age, and like Tech Lords was saying, in India there seem to be a lot incarnating, being born in that area as well.
It would seem like these children are for our benefit, not for theirs. They're almost like loudspeakers of, the proving that's there. They're there for us to say, hey, look, this is true. But where does free will factor, Tech Lords, into your perception of everything's destiny? How do we have free will then?
we have, well, according to what I know, which I cannot prove, but what I know from my personal experience, we have very little free will because of that astrological programming. And the ultimate goal for a soul uh, is to put an end to experience, because experience is always programmed, always. So if you put an end to experience, uh, your stay on Earth is finished. You don't need to stay in the infernal wheel of life and death. And but that's the ultimate goal. But you need to acquire a certain, you know, experience, enough experience, in order for this for you to ascend to higher densities of reality. A lot of people right now on the planet are experiencing this, this, putting an end to experience. There's thousands and thousands of people experiencing this, and it's fascinating. Um, so that's my point of view on this.
To me, that sounds.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Sorry, go on, Melissa.
No,
I was just going to say, it's the way I sort of describe it, or the way I perceive it, and or how I've come to understand it throughout my own life. Because the theme of my life has sort of been researching these sort of things since I was a child. Bizarrely, I've always been fascinated with all these things, and I've had my own personal experiences. So similar to Tech Lords, I can't prove anything beyond the veil, but I can only speak from my own experience or knowing of what I've found over the years. And what I've discovered is that in the third, on third density, or the third dimension of the Earth plane that we're on now, the Earth planet, there isn't a lot of free will. I would agree with that. But in terms of consciousness, when we raise our consciousness level and we come to our own understanding of knowing, which I think, again, comes from experience of lots of lifetimes of experience of, I always think it's like a swinging pendulum, the wheel of reincarnation thing. What happens is you go through a period of lifetimes, thousands of lifetimes of you might have a life of being a really important person, then you have a life of being somebody really obscure, hence the pendulum swings backwards and forwards. You might have a life of being extremely wealthy and affluent and having everything that you could possibly want in the material sense, and then the pendulum swings in the opposite direction, and your next life will be one where you're suffering in the worst possible poverty, extreme versions of poverty, and lack of everything material that you could possibly be in, that. And then generally and then eventually, as you become more conscious, which happens over a period of time in the linear sense, but in terms of having several lifetimes, you become more conscious, and then you start to just live life. Then what happens is the pendulum stops swinging extreme backwards and forwards, and eventually it starts to slow down, and then eventually it starts to get more and more still, and then the subsequent lifetimes after that become what I would call lives of great importance. So what I'm saying is, what you have externally is irrelevant, because what's happening is your consciousness is getting to a level where you are becoming aware of what's around you, and that you can actually, on a consciousness level, you can create it, but you don't create it in the third dimension. You create it in a higher dimension. But it means that your consciousness can be, for example, you can be a physical living being in the third dimension, but your consciousness can be in the fifth dimension, in a higher level of a higher density, or or in some of the children now that have been born, particularly around this time, I would say their consciousness is more in the sixth, what I would say sixth density, or the sixth dimension. So that's what happens, I think, over a period of time. This is what I've come to, my understanding is that you, after thousands of lives, you can incarnate, and then it becomes more of a conscious experience, but conscious on this planet, on the Earth planet. So you decode things separately from yourself. You can still, if you think in terms of one consciousness, you're still perceiving things separately because of vibration. You can still experience the vibrational frequency of planet Earth. So you can perceive things as solid, like a table is solid because of the vibrational frequency, that the speed that it vibrates at. And you perceive other people. There are other people in your reality, and that you have relationships with. But you've got more of an awareness, because obviously there's people on the planet that vary greatly in terms of what their awareness is. But obviously our personal awareness that we experience and our perception influence our perceptions of what other people's awareness and perceptions are, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah.
So that will influence what we think, how we think other people think about things, is largely dependent on our own consciousness level, and they vary massively. I mean, there's human beings on the planet that are still very much in the limbic brain, or the mammalian brain, the animal brain. So they are feeling emotional, but they don't have a level of higher thinking, which would be more in terms of the brain, like the neocortex, which is the newest part of the brain in terms of the human evolving, just from, the part that would differentiate the human being from an animal, from a mammal like a dog or a cat, that has emotions and feelings, but it doesn't have the same level of thinking that, the neocortex part, if that makes sense. So,
or you're sweeping the whole country. You've got all the subjects all in one big.
I'd like to welcome Beat I'm Smart in our room here. So hello.
Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, outstanding. I had a major problem with my computer liking to replug in with my headset, so
Who is
I
that?
have to come on now. So
I had a bit of a problem too, trying to log into everything, and it just wouldn't let me do anything today. I've been having a nightmare with logins and all sorts.
I'll hang back and listen and figure out where we're at, and then I'll.
Oh, who is that?
And wherever it's at.
Beat I'm Smart.
Yes.
It's Beat I'm Smart.
Oh, hey. Your little icon's different than on mine. I didn't recognize you.
Oh, I used to have it as that, and then I was like, well, maybe that's too dark for everybody, so I went to my con icon.
I'd like to ask maybe a comment here on by Signosis. What do you think so far of the discussion?
I think we slightly veered a little bit off of track, but I'm interested in what everyone's saying in this regard. But from what I'm gathering, apparently, Cartman One, you were saying about desires or things like that that would travel into different incarnations of ourselves, so to speak. Um,
Yeah.
Almost like the blueprint for the same concept as the blueprint for the evolution of ourselves, because you don't de-evolutionize after you find a way to adapt to your environment and everything that is coded into your DNA, and that is what you result into. So it sounds like that also has to do with our thought patterns and the activity of our brain uh, as we are born into each life or into the world itself.
Yeah, we don't really deviate from the plan in a current lifetime or a current existence, that it has been programmed within, as I called it, the Akash, within the DNA, which is like the soul's library of, and it's all the past existences, previous lifetimes of experiences, all, also, um, it can be skill sets. So any previous life, if you had a previous lifetime a amazing pianist or artist or anything like that, that is all stored in the Akash. So once we become aware of it, that we have that library, and we become more conscious, as we were saying before about raising the level of consciousness and how that varies massively from person to person, we can actually go into the DNA, the library of previous existences, and pull out skill sets.
And
that is when you become what you would become or term as a genius. It could be a genius in one particular field, or it could be a genius in lots of fields. Every human being has the potential to be that, because once they can go in and take a skill set out of their Akash or out of their
How are you
collection of
recommending to do
experiences.
that, to activate those codes or to get that access? How are you recommending to do that then?
It's a process of balancing everything, within the physical being or the physical vehicle. So you've obviously got the heart, which is what we were talking about earlier, is that the heart has an electromagnetic energy. So it sends information to the brain, and then the brain can process
Yeah.
that information. And
I agree with you. I agree with you on those aspects, and we know that the brain and the heart are connected. But the main question that I have is, how do you turn it on? How are we actually flipping these switches to actually physically turn them on? I mean, like, I have one technique, but it still doesn't turn it all on. I've had my Kundalini release, so I did that humming experience, and the higher vibration is a lot more than most normal people can handle. But
several things to be done, Mark,
I think you got to do it slow.
would suggest, but this is purely based on my own personal experience or my own knowing of how how this all works. But the key is to raise the vibration, your own vibrational frequency. So, and in terms of the physiological body that we exist in, and obviously a lot of our life is to do with the physical body in terms of how we understand everything. Obviously, food sources are important as one tiny aspect of this. So, the pure this could be a whole new show, because obviously this is one of the difficulties that we face is being able to get hold of the purer food sources. But to be really simple about it, obviously more light foods that are lighter in a sense, in density. So I'm not saying that people should not eat meat and they should only eat vegetables. I eat certain. I only eat chicken, but that's because I've tuned into what my personal body needs. I don't believe that there's a one size fits all, as in, oh, you should only eat vegetables and become a vegan, because if you do that, your vibration will raise up exponentially and you'll become a lighter being, and you know, be able to tap into the Akash that way. But because I think it's individual to each person, but as one small thing, you know, one aspect of this is that you could be mindful of the foods that you eat, because, you know, obviously as a general thing, if a lot of meat products would be, you know, potentially of a lower vibrational level.
Yeah, but the problem with the meat products, though, is you still need protein, and until your body adapts, and then how long does it take your body to adapt to the lower protein intake, or you have to replace it with some kind of energy exercise with like a qigong or something like that, and then we know that, you know, if you go into the emerald tablets to enter. Nobody was allowed to enter without fasting for 3 days to help get rid of some of those toxins. So I'm still just mainly looking for actual physical techniques, but techniques that won't kill me, because I believe. Go ahead. Hello.
I was from what I was observing in the actual interaction between the consciousness and the subconscious and superconscious, I've always viewed it as if the superconscious was the direct link to essentially the ether, the vibrational field. So in that sense, when you study people like the Buddhist monks or who have training in deep meditation to communicate deep within their mind, essentially our conscious mind that observes the world, it begins to create an opinion. That opinion impregnates the subconscious mind. The subconscious mind then keeps that as a note, and from there on you have that in the background. But what you're looking for is where that information, the information further from there would be stored in the superconscious. And it's through a lot of meditation and training of the mind to be able to communicate. I do believe that with enough you could communicate directly with it.
As I say, don't we have to actually first, well, I mean, just don't we have to do that in steps where we first talk with or actually gain access to our subconscious, which is internally, before we go outside and get superconscious connection?
You can actually ask your body, ask yourself direct questions. You can communicate with your body. You can either do it in your mind, or you can do it when you're in a, if you prefer to actually get yourself into a state of meditation and then communicate with your body and ask it questions.
Yeah.
Directly ask the DNA questions.
Nikki, I'm sorry, I didn't catch the other guy's name. I was kind of directing that question toward him.
Seeknosis.
Seeknosis?
Yeah.
Yeah. So essentially, yes, it's your subconscious creates that pattern off of a habit. So if you're consistently training your mind to think a certain way, consciously and aware of this, then you're slowly seeping that into your subconscious. So you've passed on to the second stage, so to speak, and then from there train yourself to actually communicate directly to your superconscious. Not something that I've achieved personally. I'm just stating something that I've observed from reading on the subject and listening in, you know.
I would ask, have you read or studied anything on remote viewing yet?
Yeah.
So does that
remote viewing?
Does that practice of remote viewing? Because the first step is
Ingo Swann was the most well known, I guess.
Yeah, I know. What I'm trying to do is figure out the step, if that's a step, you know, because the first thing you do is you write that one little scribble in less than a second, and then what you're doing is decrypting that scribble with all of these, textures, colors, smells, tastes, and in a sense, you're decrypting whatever that scribble was. So that's the technique toward building the remote viewing mind, but that's also teaching you how to access it, or to gain information from it if you pose
Yes.
a particular question.
Can
Yes.
I answer something about that?
Go ahead.
Not remote viewing, but you were asking about techniques. The greatest technique in my life to access my superconscious is through creativity. That is the #1 thing you can do. If you even just, maybe the same technique as remote viewing, you just think of a word, put it down on a piece of paper, and just start flowing. Just let whatever comes in your mind flow through you, whether it's writing or speaking or art or music. I think creativity is one of the greatest gifts in life, to access the spirit, access higher realms, access your akashic records, access, if you constantly be in a creative open mode, just to let stuff flow into you. That's the best technique that I can think of. And I'm not a big meditator, so that's how I've done it my entire life.
So art puts you in a... Go ahead.
Yeah, I would have to agree with Melissa that ever since a child, I've always been very creative, and I used to play the piano as a child, and obviously artwork and writing and all of that. And I mean, particularly with art, if I start on an art project, I actually have to consciously think in the logical sense now, am I going to start this art now? Because I know that if I start actually the physical action of painting or doing my artwork, that energy flow will just turn on like a tap now, immediately. And then what happens is I then lose all sense of time and all sense of linearity. So if I've obviously got normal things, day-to-day life things doing, I can be up doing a piece of artwork for 3 nights in a row and have probably about 2 hours sleep, and then by the end of it I feel like I'm going a bit mad, like no wonder you hear a lot about artists going mad. Well, I think what it is that they basically move out of that linearity, third dimensional reality in a consciousness level, because they tap into what I would call the source energy, which is where you find all the answers, which is where you can directly communicate with the super consciousness. So I would have to agree with that.
Would you say that the most time when you're actually connected in with that source is the transition in between wake and sleep, though? I mean, that's because when you are asleep, you're connected to source, or you're talking, your subconscious is running things. But then in that transition in between sleep and wake, now you're gaining access to it, because you're 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and then that's where you get your major revelations, or what do you call it?
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely. Sometimes I have to, even on the way into sleep, sometimes it happens, and I have to turn the light on to write something down, because things pop into my head. I'm like, oh my God, that's a wonderful poem. I have to write that down. And in the morning when you wake up and you don't hit the alarm immediately, or you don't, it's on the weekend, just lay there and I concoct recipes to cook. I'm not a big cook, but I'm half awake, half asleep, and I'm like, I've got recipes for scones and brownies and desserts flowing through my head, and I'm like, oh, I could mix this with that, and I'm like, where is this shit coming from? Like, why do I have this urge to cook? And you just go with it. And I've created so many meals, which is in an art form in itself. It's creativity. just from laying there, maybe I'm hungry, so my brain is thinking of stuff I could be cooking. I don't, but I come up with some weird concoctions, and
So with the cooking and the artwork,
it's all the same.
what's happening is you are expressing authentic self,
Yes.
and these are things that you know, and then when you're doing your authentic self activities, you could just do them all the time.
You've tapped into the source, and you can just do it as if you don't have to have had any training.
It's a muscle.
But that's a source of you, though, right?
It's a muscle. You have to learn to let go. And the reason I guess you're having those thoughts half awake, half asleep, is because your body is letting go, where maybe through the day you haven't learned that feeling. If you meditate on that feeling of half awake, half asleep, and you get to know that feeling, then you can bring that up anytime during the day by getting into that same feeling. So, that might be a good.
Yeah, but doesn't that require the no muscle movement? You have to be perfectly still, don't you?
No,
I mean, like
No, you don't. It's in your mind. It's in your feeling. It's in your feeling body. It has nothing to do with moving. It has to do with letting go of concentrating. If you concentrate too hard, it's your conscious mind concentrating on something. That's why a lot of people come to great conclusions about life and movie scripts while driving down the road or sweeping or vacuuming. It's because your body is doing something autonomically, and it's distracting you from concentrating too hard on anything. And then you get those free flow of inspiration.
Flow is the kind of the key word, isn't it? Because when you are tapped into the source, or the authentic self, or the higher consciousness, or the super consciousness, everything is free flowing. There's no kind of like, like for example, if you were writing something, you wouldn't think when you're in that flow, oh, should I do that? Should I not do that? It literally just is coming. It's literally pouring out of you, and you've got all this energy, and you're just like, and it's just, you can just do it. There's no kind of like
judgment. There's no judgment.
There's no judgment, nope. And there's no kind of like, oh, actually, I'm going to scribble that bit out, and I'm going to go back, and then that there's no writer's block in the writing sense, or judgment of your work. So, like, if I was doing a piece of artwork, I'm not going to sit there and go, oh, no, I actually hate that. No, I'm going to screw it. Oh, I don't like that. I'm going to destroy that. Now, I have attempted to do artwork. When I haven't been connected to the source, and it doesn't work. I now obviously know the difference. I know the difference. I know when I'm connected into it, and I know when I'm not. And it's, I know that when if I try and do anything creative and I'm not connected to the source, nothing is free flowing. And like Melissa said, one of the key things to not being connected is that you will tend to be quite judgmental of the work. You'll be like, oh no, that's crap, I don't like that, or I'm going to destroy that because it's not how I decided I wanted it to be in my head. That's not being connected to the source. If you're overthinking something, or you're thinking about something, or analysing it each step of every step of the way as you're doing it, then the chances are you're not connected in, you're not locked in. If you're connected in, you're sort of, it's like a flowing energy. It's literally like turning on a tap, and then the tap's running, and it's literally just flowing, and it feels really good.
Right?
So I'd have to ask you, be damn smart.
Yeah.
What are you doing that is creative in your life? How are you creative?
I guess that would only be in my writing.
So when you write, are you more analytical and think really hard about what you're saying, or do you just free flow?
No, I go to basics. What I first do, I try to master perspective. So in order to see something, you have to master perspective. So from my perspective, it looks this way. From this person's perspective, it looks this way.
Analytical.
And from an outside perspective, it looks this way.
Oh, that's fantastic if you're a lawyer. But,
well, I do the law thing too, though.
Yeah,
so.
and it's a fantastic. It's an intelligence, and from the way you comment and everything I've ever read of yours, you are very analytical, and that is not a creative process. That is a material, brain process.
But I'm analytical. I'm analytical in the process of breaking things down to the basics.
Right.
So what's the very root? Strip away all this stuff that's excess, that's made everybody confused, and say, well, what is this basic principle that we're working with? And then from there, how can I help somebody understand from this perspective, this principle? And then I guess I just know a lot of words, so
no, that's fantastic.
The thing helps, but
that is intelligence, and it's philosophy, it's reasoning, it's analyzing, it's science, and all those things are extremely important. But that is not the creative process, and what we were talking about in terms of letting that go.
Be damn smart.
Yes.
When you're doing that, does at times when you're passionate about something that you're dissecting and analyzing, does it really inspire you where your ideas just start flowing to you, and you can sense all those different perspectives as you're looking at the situation?
Yes.
You actually got that creative inspiration that they're speaking of, just more on an analytical level. And essentially it sounds like everyone is really speaking of knowing that inside of them there is their perfect self, when you don't feel that there's judgment on your actions, when you know that what you're doing is what you flow to and what comes from you, and you connect to that and just let it go. It sounds really a lot like that inspiration comes depending on what moves you and what makes you feel confident in it. That's just what I'm gathering from listening.
Yeah. So what moves me though is just finding the truth. So I've had to more or less back up and say, well, okay, I figured out that all these people are lying. Academia is pointing you in one direction, and politics is pointing you in another direction. Religion's trying to tell you something else. And what I figured out is everybody's freaking lying. So now I have to dissect it to get back down to the basics, and then build back up from there. But if it enters my realm, it has to have some kind of basis, proof that I can flow with to bring it out forward. You know what I mean? I'm probably not very well liked on whatever I talk on, because I have so many opposing opinions to everybody else, because everybody else believes in this illusion. So and my point is I try to break the illusion by giving the basics to help people find the truth, because I think if they don't figure this out soon, then there's going to be problems.
Well, there's the truth that I think you're trying to share with the world, which I appreciate. I always respect. Like I said, I like your writing. You always come with a lot of information, and here is what's going on. And you're never disrespectful or anything like that, or I haven't found it. And it's very appreciated, but it's like you're trying to share with the world information, but the kind of questions you were asking us or Cartman earlier about how do I go about this or how do I go about that, it seems like you have one ingredient that's very strong, which is your mind and your mental acuity, and it's like you're searching for that flow that we're talking about, which is another aspect to you that I don't think you've delved into deeply enough.
Yeah, well, I'm looking for technique. Because
right.
we can talk about whatever until the sky's blue, but unless we can teach people how to do it, how to access it, what they're accessing, see, I already broke it down into the basics, and then what I haven't even said yet is defensive, because the reason we aren't connected to source yet is because other people can hack into it, and we've never been taught the skills to defend ourselves from allowing somebody that access, because it's kind of like opening a phone line to somebody, and then somebody's tapping in on that phone line, and some of the problems that we do have, especially in the religious world, is, you know, these other entities hacking in and taking control of people, because people don't know how to use their mind or protect their mind from these incoming extra entities or species or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, there are some bad things out there, you know. I mean, granted, we're getting rid of some of them, but you know, people don't even know the basics, and that's what that's what I'm trying to get at. Is I want to know the basics. I want to teach people or tell people how this stuff works.
Well, you're basically talking about protecting your mind from being brainwashed and blueprinted and all that kind of stuff.
Well, you are being, I mean, if you watch TV at all, you're being brainwashed. I mean, and most people don't even know it, and that's the easy stuff. I mean, I can tell somebody how to not be brainwashed because I can tell somebody how not to be hypnotized, you know, but there's other things outside of that that I haven't got to yet, that I haven't figured out yet, and that's kind of why I'm here.
That's why I guess Hartman and I were both talking about inspiration and flow, and I don't know if you I don't know if you understood that procedure. Like, we were actually trying to give you, like, I was trying to tell you how I do it, and she was trying to tell you how she does it.
And I agreed with both of you, though. I mean, like, I know it works, and that's what you're doing, and but then I'm analyzing it on how that works also. But yeah.
I do understand what you're saying, Bidan. So in terms of, I've got, although I'm quite a creative person, for years, and I've always wanted to have a easy to understand, broken down formula for how things work and how things, you know, in terms of those, in terms of the brain, the right creative side of the brain works. I like things to be explained to me, and so I really understand them. But what I realised after a period of time is that if I was getting too far into that, needing to understand everything sort of broken down to the point that it's very clear, and I have to be honest, I still do have an aspect of my personality that is like that I still have to have it all broken down and in easy to sort of digestible points. This is just me personally, that I quite like the logical element of it. And there is, you know, there's a lot of people that need that, and it's like the people that need evidence. And I still, you know, that some people will say, you know, why do you need evidence? You know, why, you know, you can switch a light on, and you know that electricity makes that light work, and you can't actually physically see it. You know, well, most people can't, obviously there's ways of showing that, but generally, if people turn a light switch on in the house and the electric, and what people say is, well, you can accept that works, and you don't have to actually see the evidence of it or see it working. But I don't necessarily agree with that. I do think there are people that would find it a lot easier if there was evidence. But the only, I wouldn't say problem with that, because there's no problem with anything, because discussing things and looking at different things is how we learn and evolve anyway. But that often takes people away from the free-flowing connecting to the source, which is what they're trying to do in the first instance. This is a kind of weird paradoxical thing that goes on when we're trying to break something down into an easy to understand. And you are, and Bidam Smart, you are, I agree with him, it's very articulate. I think your writing and the way you describe things is amazing. And you do put it into a format where a lot of people will understand something, which is a real skill. That in itself is an art form.
Yeah,
I agree. So I do, you know, I think you're amazing in that respect. but because a lot of people can only describe things in terms of how they decode their reality, so they then describe it how they would understand it, which isn't necessarily how another person is going to understand it. Whereas Bidam, what you have an ability to do, from what I've seen, is that you can break something down and describe it in a very clear, articulate way that several people could understand. You know, a lot of people could understand it, and that's really good. But the only thing is with that, not with what you do personally, but I know with my own self, when I sometimes try and understand things and break things down, it then disconnects me from the source because I'm in that linear
third dimensional
reality.
Which is fun.
The key is if you can flip, but there is a necessity for that. So after a while, what you can do is you can raise your frequency, vibration, consciousness level to connect with a source, which could be, if you like, fifth dimensional. And then if you need to go back into linearity, you can travel, you can lower the frequency and go back into linearity, you know, when you need, into third dimension again. So it's still, you know, if you can do both, it's great.
Melissa.
Yeah. Yes, Tech Lords.
Would you like to comment on this? I think you wanted to talk on this.
Oh, I was just agreeing with Cartman. I was just like, yep. No, I was saying there's a balance. There's a back and forth. I love analytical stuff. That's why I appreciate people that talk directly. I like science. I like analyzing things. I like truth and honesty and the whole everything mental. I'm very much in my head a lot of times. I love puzzles and games, and you know, it's just like mental activity is fantastic. But it's a whole different feeling than the flow of creativity. It's a whole different realm.
Well,
it's wonderful to have both. You have to have a balance in life, and through that you get to know yourself better. It's not just one or the other.
I would say my flow is on finding the information. So I look and see what people are saying, and or I have my own questions that I'm trying to answer. And what I do when I allow flow or connect with is I allow it to go in and find that information, find that expert that knows this aspect or that aspect of it, and then I just go hunt them down, but I just let my instinct tell me where to go to find the information.
There you
so
go.
that I can become clear on it. And then once I'm clear on it, then I can turn around and give it to somebody else or comment on somebody else's information. A lot of the times I've already studied a lot of stuff and been around. I've been working on the big picture for like over a year now, so like I got a pretty good idea what the big picture is, what's happening in the world. So it's kind of easy for me to plug in and tell somebody, this is what's going on here, this is what's going on there, this is how this interacts with this. So that's my flow.
Well, there's a big difference between information and knowledge. Information is something third dimensional. It's, you know, some of the most intelligent people know the most facts. They can win Jeopardy. They are tuned into what's going on in the world. They can impart that. Then there's knowledge, and I've actually had conversations with people where we're just talking back and forth, and I'm not a big reader. I haven't read that many books in my life, and certain things that I've said that come out of my mouth, I'm like, where the hell did that come from? Knowledge of something, like, and then I Google it or look it up, and it's some kind of Swami said it, you know, or some Buddhist, or it's some philosophy of some kind in some book, and I'm like, well, I've never read it anywhere. I'm connecting with some kind of, as I'm talking to somebody, I'm teaching myself. Things fly out of my mouth, and I'm like, where the hell did that come from?
Gnosis, or you know, which is Greek for knowing.
And
it's knowing.
And knowing and knowledge are two separate things.
And don't forget the word wisdom.
Well, wisdom comes from knowing the difference.
The application of the knowledge.
Yeah. So wisdom is definitely application. There you go. So they're two different things, and you have to, like I said, what we were saying earlier, balance. Being able to go from the flow of knowing to the intellectualizing of, analyzing. So.
Well, I really like that word balance you just said, because that's a lot of, we talk about yin yang, and what people sometimes fail to realize is the balance within it. So any aspect that you pick or any information you look at, you have to look at or find the balancing factor. What's the opposite of that? So like a lot of times when somebody says something to me, my mind automatically calculates, well, what's the opposite of that? And then it says, well, okay, is that correct then from this balance point or that balance point, or where is the balance between this side and that side, and then which one is better? So then I think the basis of all of it is to figure out what is the right and what is the wrong, and defining that as only, does it harm somebody or does it not harm somebody? And then the balance point of that is, well, it doesn't harm nor does it help, and then so it doesn't matter.
That still sounds very much mind-centered, though. But it's like fractal, There's a balance within the mind. There's a balance within the soul. There's a balance within the totalitarian, or whatever you say. It still sounds like you're still talking about the mind, though. And I'm talking about balance within the known and the unknown.
Well, how about the balance between the heart and the mind?
Yeah.
So now we have to talk about intent, because now what people, the people that I hope are listening to the show, or the people that are listening to the show, I hope they gain an understanding of intent, because that's the thing that you can project from your heart energy out into things, objects, people, yourself, and that's one aspect that nobody talks about.
Oh God, I was just, Cartman mentioned something earlier about the law of attraction, and my personal experience with law of attraction, when your brain goes, oh, I want to win the lottery, and you go and you try and push stuff with your mind, and like, oh, I'm going to attract this to me, and it doesn't work. The experience I had.
Well, you don't want to win the lottery. That's not that's not the issue. The issue is what are you going to do with it once you do win it?
No, so there's a magnetic resonance in your heart that actually is so powerful that when your heart and your mind are connected in a unified line as to an objective that you want. I put on a birthday party for a loved one of mine, a friend, and I just wanted to make this the best birthday party ever. And it was the universe, basically. It's like walking through a crowded room and everybody feels you coming, and they part like a Red Sea, because that's what the universe does when you are heart-centered. It like resonates through the universe, and that to me is law of attraction, in terms of something that is a heart-centered desire with the mental focus connected to it. And everything I did for that party, people were like calling me up saying, can I help you? And I'm like, oh. And then I wanted something delivered on a Thursday, and I thought, oh shit, I have to work Thursday. Oh, that's not going to work. The phone rings, and the guy from the company delivering this thing to my house says, oh, we can't come Thursday. Can we come Friday? And I'm like, oh, yeah, sure. It was like everything that I wanted, it was like parting the Red Sea. But it was like, that is the true law of attraction in terms of what you were saying.
Yeah, and another aspect of that is the eighth time, or the eighth opportunity that's presented to you. So when
what about 3? I always thought it was 3.
No, it's 8.
If you try something,
8 is the magical number where you can get the golden mean from taking any two numbers, and the 8th iteration of it is a golden mean number.
you mean I have to try something 8 times before it's
No, you don't have to try, but you have to be aware of what is presenting itself to you, so that if you know that is the direction.
Did you, when you say golden mean, because I don't know a lot about this, do you mean like Fibonacci? Golden and the phi thing? I can't remember. I like I said, I don't know a lot about that.
It's one of the sacred geometry calculations. So like if you study the pyramids and then some of these other calculations, you can derive other numbers from it. So, and somebody that was an expert in it that applied it toward music, because tones and vibration is resonance is frequency is communication. I mean, like, or the senses and perceiving things. So, but what he was trying to say with it was, well, it may take up to 8, but 8 is the magical thing where if you work hard enough at something, you know, because like the universe isn't really sure that you want this, and you know, like, so, but it will present opportunities, but by the 8th time or after the 7th failure, the 8th time will be a success or whatever. You know what I mean?
Tech Lords, do you have a take or an understanding about the numerological aspect of how our blueprints work, or do you know what I mean? Like us, you know, each individual soul and you know, or connecting to source in terms of what we were talking about. Me and Melissa were saying about the flow and connecting to source.
Okay, well, from my knowing, we are multidimensional. We have our higher self, our cosmic self, our source, call it whatever you want. It bears many names. Then you have the soul, and then you have the ego. So the higher self, or the cosmic self, dominates the soul, and the soul dominates the ego. As far as the higher mind, I heard somebody talk about the higher mind. All thoughts originate from our cosmic self, but if we're not ready to take too much, because a thought is a form of light. It's pure light, and if the ego or the brain is not ready to receive that light like a thunderbolt, it has to go through a buffer zone. And B. Damn Smart was talking about entities that we're manipulating. So those are astral entities that are manipulating thoughts that originate from our higher self or cosmic self or source. So to dim the light a little bit, but at the same time they manipulate that thought, and it comes to our mind of the ego, and then the ego reflects on that thought and has an emotion. And that reflection, believe it or not, causes us to age and ultimately die. So if somebody would not reflect ever, that person would be immortal, because there would be no loss of energy. Now I'm going a little far here, but basically every time a soul incarnates in the physical realm, there is a program. You cannot incarnate without some sort of life plan or some sort of destiny. Call it whatever you want. It's a cosmic law. But again, I'm going to repeat it. The ultimate goal for a human being is to put an end to that experience.
To die. You every time you say that, every time you say for the experience to end, my brain goes, oh, the ultimate goal is to die.
No, that's not what I said. The experience is whatever is programmed for the soul.
So lack of experience is death, right?
Yeah, because you have to go back to the astral world, then you come back. But to put an end to experience is to put an end to the manipulation and to put an end to the programming. This is our that's our ultimate goal.
But when you stop experiencing, you die, right?
No, you only die when you want the choice.
Not necessarily. Some people who reach that goal have a role to play on the planet. And we've seen quite a few of these individuals we call initiates. The man of Nazareth was one. Buddha was another one, and there was many. But to put an end to experience means to crush the astrological programming or your destiny, your programmed destiny, and then free will.
So what I was saying before about not clearing your karma, but in the aspect clearing your karma where you don't need to learn any lessons anymore, where you're
Correct. That's exactly it, and that's to crush the programming, the manipulation. We're dominated from our cosmic self and from the astral world. So everybody's dominated on the planet, and we have to liberate ourselves from that domination and have an equal relationship with our cosmic self because we are multidimensional. And eventually, when you manage to crush the programming, and that you let's say you format the soul because you don't need to record any experience anymore because the soul acts as a recorder device. It records all experiences, and then it goes to the, like Nikki was saying, it goes to the Akashic records for study in order to prepare the next life plan. But
I'm not coming back. I am not coming back. This is it. I'm done. Right now. I'm just like, I'm not suicidal, but it's like most of my life I've spent kind of like, really? I don't want to be here. Why am I here? It's just like there's something there, but it's like what? And it's like my greatest triumph in life will be mastering myself. I've got nothing to do with the world or the economy or other people or anything. It's just me, you know. It's just the last hurdle of like, but so Gov Spiders is on here. I haven't heard him speak. He's muted.
Sorry. Yeah, just listening in for a bit. I've been up all night, so I'm just trying to catch up to whatever you guys are talking about. I guess I'm not so in tune with any of my spiritual side or anything like that, so it's sort of all new to me, just sort of listening in.
All right. I'm being
Signosis, we'd like to hear your thoughts on it.
I know, you need to be the moderator here.
Moderator. I'm just really observing myself, but honestly, I can understand the angle from which Be Damn Smart is coming from, and it's more so that he like myself, the way that I went on this journey to learn about any of this a couple years back was that I wanted to know what was the common denominator, the underlying similarities in the different tactics that people use to perform miracles, because you see miracles in different religions. You see miracles performed under, let's say, what are those called? Like when a child is in danger or something like that, and you have this overflow of adrenaline, and you perform somewhat superhuman feats. That they all connect into something, and there should be a way to observe and find the pattern to get to that, and to be able to express that to someone else so that they could understand how to perform that themselves. And that's why I was trying to get into the whole training the subconscious to communicate with the superconscious, which basically is your connection to the Akashic records, which would be the answer or the realization of whatever you desire. But how to train that. Um, so I was listening to both of you and just gathering my own thoughts there. All three of you, really.
Nikki, can you respond to this?
Yeah, I would say that going back to what Bidam Smart said earlier on in terms of I think Melissa used the term balance. And a good starting point would be, in terms of, if we're talking generic here for everyone, and it's very difficult to talk generic formula to connect to the super consciousness, because like Tech Lords was saying, souls are at different levels of evolution, if you like, in terms of where they're at on this reincarnation wheel. Or, there's some people that you could say have incarnated as a volunteer, so perhaps they've already left the wheel of reincarnation, they've just come back as a teacher, or maybe the being Jesus Christ, you could say, was a teacher in that respect. But in terms of the generic thing, I think to take us back to basics, it's to achieve some kind of balance within the physiological body. You've obviously got the heart feeling center, and you've got the brain, and then it's the ability to connect these things up, which then we've got more chance of connecting to that source, or being able to tap into the flow of energy, like Melissa was saying, in terms of, a good starting point is to be more creative. If you're somebody that's more of a logical, critical thinker, in other words, you find it easier to be in that mode as opposed to the creative mode, whereas other people might find it easy to be creative but not easy to be predominantly left-hand brain, or more of a logical thinker. The key is to exercise that aspect of your being. So if you struggle with creativity, then the only way you can strengthen that part of your physiological makeup, or strengthen that, if in terms of the brain, strengthen the right hemisphere of the brain, is to do the things that would exercise that part of you. And conversely, if you struggle, if you're imbalanced on the, it's also not a good thing to be imbalanced in terms of the right hemisphere of the brain, because there is, when we exist in third density, on the third dimension, there is linearity, and there is benefit to be derived from being, operating in that mode. So, you need to strengthen those aspects of the brain. You need to do exercises that would strengthen the logical part of you. And then the ultimate goal, I think, personally, is to then achieve some kind of balance where everything connects up.
So,
and you can function as a holistic being. That's sort of the true meaning of what to be holistic is to be able to connect everything up and become balanced. So that would be the only thing that I could add at this point, because obviously it's difficult because everybody's at different levels, if that makes sense. The soul is at different levels.
Thank you. Yeah, at some point, I believe it was Melissa that mentioned that when you are in those, and be damn smart, that when you're in those waking hours between waking and sleep, and being able to connect with that, right, and using that in order to get into that inspiration and look for what you want. I recall as a child being at a retreat and observing the people that were there. So it's 48 hours and they're fasting, and while they're fasting they're also praying and looking in, basically asking for what they want. People who were ill asking to be cured, people who wanted to correct things in their lives. And I did witness plenty of people who came out and had very different lives after using this technique. Now, mind you, this was religion, but as a child, I was already observing this just logically in the sense of, okay, so everybody's awake and they're basically trying to stay awake for 48 hours. Everyone's fasting. And so now you've basically drained yourself down to that point where you would possibly be like in those moments of between being awake and asleep, and you are constantly through repetition asking for what you want and communicating with yourself out loud and internally. And through that and different aspects that they use, ceremonial, so to speak, in order to stimulate the mind. And so an artist would use their art and they let themselves go and they're in that flow of it. But it's observing how those things had the same type of effect as being able to communicate with your oneness, your uniqueness, and getting into that inspiration and flowing.
Yeah, you know what? There are three things that do that I know of. One is drugs.
Yep.
Like peyote, mescaline, mushrooms, pot, ayahuasca, that can achieve that shift in consciousness. The second is what you talked about. It's mental tiredness. I mean, I have written some of the most beautiful poetry when I've been up for 48 hours and drank 3 cups of coffee. Because I'm just like, my brain is like, blah. It's just, and I start just writing, and I'm like, holy shit, where did that come from? And the third aspect is monotonous, like I said, sweeping, vacuuming, driving, anything that can remove or alter or shift or depress. And I guess 4, you could be damn smart. The fourth aspect is half awake, half asleep. Those 4 aspects, you have to destroy the mental hold that your consciousness has on you. Any of those 4 things will drastically shift your perception into a weakened mental state. I will say a weakened conscious state, so that the other realms can take hold. So the flow begins.
In effect, lose control.
Yes, exactly.
Which a lot of people would have, there'd be a fear attached to losing control, because they may have programs in their cache that they know that when they lost control before, or even in their current lifetime, there's a memory that has been logged within the being, that when they lost control, something bad happened.
And it's fear. It's
fear of losing control.
Fear. Yeah.
But you have to lose control in order to connect to that source.
Man, I hate losing control. That's you guys are talking about stuff that's like, I can't stand losing control. Well, I have to be in maintaining of all my senses,
You're not secure in your own body. There's a center of you that you fear, that you don't trust yourself in terms of your mind is so strong, and you're centered in your intelligence body, that you don't trust your center, you don't trust your being. Like, what if you did lose control? What if someone had to lift you up and help you out and do stuff for you, and you were incapacitated? I mean, like, do you trust yourself to handle yourself in those situations? There's another intelligence to you. There's a deeper intelligence to you.
Have you noticed as well, when people go through these either a midlife crisis, as they term it, or some kind of major tragedy, what we would be, beyond the veil, what we consider to be tragic is not tragic. It's just an experience, because it's equal to what we would consider to be good or bad in the third density. But when people go through something tragic, quite often is when they have their awakenings, or because what happens is when they then become, they reach a point in life where they have nothing to lose in a sense.
Well,
So that they then lose the fear of losing control. Once they lose the fear of what people think of them, or basically they've had so many horrendous experiences or tragedy, if you like, that they reach this point where actually it doesn't really, they don't feel the need to control anything anymore, because they come to this point of I've got nothing to lose.
Well,
and that's why so many people have that awakening then, when they've been through these tragedies in life.
You found the fifth thing. That was the fifth thing, right?
Yeah.
So tragedy, half awake, half asleep. Creativity, what was it? Half awake, half asleep. Drugs. Yeah. So you found another one.
and
it works.
Yeah.
And you've been commenting on it, and something that they utilize in the media and everything a lot is basically fear. I mean, I think it was Ronald Reagan who spoke about the only how the world would be so different if we were facing an alien threat as opposed to being on ourselves. And he's speaking on, like, if everybody were to look up and say, oh shit, that's a lot bigger problems than whatever we have down here.
Yeah.
Then their fears will let them forget everything and reprogram themselves to what they have to do to continue forward from there.
Well, it would unite all the black people and all the white people and all the Christians and all the Muslims. That's what it would do. That's what he was basically talking about.
Exactly, and it's utilizing that fear in order to make people automatically reprogram their thought pattern on it.
Well, fear is the greatest motivator on this planet.
Unfortunately.
It is fear. Fear is the greatest motivator. Love is the greatest force on the planet, but fear is the greatest motivator, and they know that. And they pray.
Actually they feed off of that. So and then when you bring your attention to it, and you focus on it, then you're feeding them directly. It's the same thing. You get in the same aspect in church also. When the mass group of people, they are feeding an entity that's at the head of that. And that's the one thing that everybody needs to figure out, is they need to stop acting, thinking, and being in fear.
Yes.
And if people, I think, if they could understand that they are a light body and they just have a body at this moment in this physical vibration or shift, technically, if you get killed, you're set free. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. We're here because of our contracts. We are here to learn lessons, and sometimes, we may not see it, but somebody dying early may be a lesson for somebody else. So we don't actually figure out all these connections of how one aspect of one thing affects another thing. So this big long line of causes, of chain of cause and effect happening. But fear is the one thing everybody's got to get over.
Yep.
Definitely. Sorry, go on.
Oh, well, I'm going to let you do a little comment here, but we're getting at the 1 hour 45 minute already. So we're going to start wrapping things up very soon. So go ahead, Dickie.
Yeah, I was just going to say, fear is the mind killer, as they say. Fear is the thing that will prevent people from moving forward, as collectively as in it will prevent people connecting with other people, because obviously once we access the higher consciousness, or the super consciousness, as we termed it during the discussion, is that will disconnect us. Fear will disconnect us, and it will keep us in that low level of vibration. If we stay in that low level of vibration, we cannot access or connect to the source and raise our consciousness. Once we raise our consciousness level to a certain point, then we can, the fear of anything relating to fear, or residing in that fear paradigm vibration, can't exist in the same space as something that exists in the love vibration, in terms of fear and love. So they can't. It's like a radio station. Two different radio stations can't exist within the same space. You know, you can't tune into one radio station and tune into the other one. Sometimes you get like that weird little crossover on a radio where it's going sort of all, you hear these weird little crossover voices and crackly, but generally they can't, you know, they can't exist in the same space. So yeah, and it's just finding the things that, and it's different for different people. There's no set formula for every individual person. Each individual person has a different thing that they would derive that feeling of joy or happiness from, which would raise their vibration up. You know, for one person it could be walking through a wood. For another person it could be sat eating a cheeseburger. For another person it could be doing artwork. For another person it could be listening to a certain piece of music. If I was going to say one thing that would benefit lots of people in instantaneously raising their vibration, actually there's two things that are really, really powerful and instantaneous. Music is one, in terms of instantly raising the vibration of a person, and again that is individual to the person, because obviously one piece of music to one person could be horrendous, another person might love it. The other one is laughing and humour. Laughing is one of the most powerful generators of raising up a vibration of a person instantly. If you want to raise the vibration, if you inject humour into everything, obviously something you might find funny, another person would be highly offended by it.
I find it all funny. Thank you very much.
It's subjective, obviously, to what, you know, people have different views, but yeah, music works instantaneously on the frequency levels of someone, you know, the vibration. You know, you can be really depressed and feeling really low, and you know, it's like you can get yourself, you can change, you can alter consciousness states, or you can alter your state of consciousness. If you had an interview for a really important sort of potential job that you wanted to do, but you know, and you knew this interview, your whole life depended on this interview, and you really, really wanted to get this job because it meant a massive life change for the better. So everything, you know, quite often having that pressure can put you in a state of fear, which lowers your vibration, and then you don't bring in your brain doesn't connect to the source. So when you're in the interview, you don't flow. The interview doesn't go well. So if you wanted to put yourself into a you know, alter your state of consciousness, you wanted to put yourself in, say, a high performance state because you were dealing with a certain type of person, and you needed that rapport with that specific person in order to get that job, because they then connected to you or could relate to you in the right way. You could listen to a specific piece of music on the way to the interview in a car that would alter your state of consciousness, that would get you in that high performance state. So you could create a good rapport with the person who's giving the interview, so they would then connect to you and think, yeah, this person's perfect for that job, and you could get the job. Type of, you know, that's just one example of, but what that basically equates to is raising your vibration to a level where you can connect to the source, and then things can flow. And like Melissa was saying about the party, once you're connected to the source, life becomes like this amazing, magical, synchronistic flow of events. You're thinking, oh my God, you know, like you said about, Melissa, you said about you couldn't do something on a Thursday, you had to work, and then as if by magic you got that phone call and said, oh, we can't do Thursday anyway, it's got to be Friday. So, you know, it's like everything just opens up for you,
Melissa,
and works really well for you.
Melissa, can you answer on that?
On what?
On what was just said by Nikki, and after that we're going to start wrapping things up.
No, I was totally agreeing. I was laughing out loud. I'm sure I was interrupting her because I was giggling in the background. I love laughing, and I love the sound of laughter. I love laughing and inspiring. You know how it is when you start giggling and you have an infectious laughter, and other people start laughing, and they don't know laughing. and humor is one of the honestly, it's a gift. It's a gift from God. Humor is.
It is. It's so powerful. If people want a formula for raising their vibration,
It's
to
just
connect to the source, humour, whatever makes you laugh, whether you like random weird humour, which I know me and Melissa tend to have similar sort of humour, or whether you like something, it doesn't matter what the humour is. Anything that makes you laugh, well, is an instant formula. I'm 100% certain about this as well. It's an instant formula for raising your vibration. And as I said, the other thing that I would say is music. Music is the other very powerful raiser of vibration. So if you want to alter consciousness and lift yourself up out of the fear vibration.
And I often find the people that are in need most of awakening in life are in need of the most humor. All these stupid social justice warriors and people on the internet and on YouTube videos that I've been like drowning myself in just to see what the hell's going on with the normal people in the world. It's like they don't have a sense of humor anymore. There's no more laughter. There's no more irony. There's no more. It's like, oh, you've offended me.
That's partly what all this political correctness is born out of, because the elites know full well that is a full, it's all about disconnecting people and not allowing that flow to happen, because they know that once that happens, their game's over.
There's no humor in these people at all. Beware of people that can't laugh.
Okay, so.
Yeah, I laugh at myself all the time. I'm fucking
Okay, we're gonna start wrapping things up.
That's my wrap up. I'm laughing at myself because I'm fucking ridiculous. There you go.
So am I.
Okay, so I'm gonna go in order on my screen. Signosis, maybe Guff Spider, maybe little word here. Melissa, Nikki, and Be Damn Smart. So, Signosis, your final thoughts tonight?
My final thoughts, definitely a great conversation about raising the vibrational senses. I do use solfeggio beats. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but it's kind of a vibrational frequency meditational music, and you can use it at different frequencies. I use between 500 and 700 sometimes, and that really raises your vibration, and it's very good for inspiring you. Thank you, everybody, for having me.
Well, thank you, Signosis. Gov, any words on our way out of this show?
Yeah, sure. Real quick, I'm happy I stopped in. It was cool listening to all of you guys. I mean, this isn't exactly my subject, but it's cool to listen in, even though I don't really have much perspective. I guess as far as I'm concerned, I was just talking about flow states in the comments a little bit. I can sort of see similarities in those concepts. Google talks about flow states, and it's sort of essentially what Melissa was just saying, sort of putting yourself into that specific state, changing sort of your entire train of thought and getting into an entirely different perspective on what you're doing. And I guess that talking about it that way is probably a way better way for other people to get into it. I just don't have much spiritual experience, but I do definitely see all of these trends, and I definitely know that I do feel things that I don't ever fully understand, and that's definitely somewhere that I do need to build into and learn more about. And so, yeah, it's been fun sitting around listening to you guys. Thanks for having me.
Melissa, your final thoughts?
Oh, I already gave my final thoughts. I'm fucking hilarious. Because why? Because I like to amuse myself. Hell yeah! That's all I say. Yeah, there's a flow to that.
Okay, Nikki, your final thoughts for tonight?
Yeah, I think my final thought would be to sort of address all the things that we've discussed. You know, and I think it is important that we need to take on board everybody's perspective, as Bidam, you know, does mindfully on the network. As you know, I've noticed that he will. I'm impressed by the way he writes stuff, and I think that aspect is very important. So, you know, and obviously me and Melissa talking about connecting to the source and the flow, and I think that it's just achieving some kind of balance in life, you know, and becoming holistic, I would say, is sort of a good goal for people to want to attain. Obviously, you know, ultimately it's choice at the end of the day. You know, choice in the you know, in terms of how we process our thoughts. But yeah, I think it's to be holistic, and if you can, you know, and like I say, hopefully answering some of the questions. You know, one of the best formulas for raising the frequency, which would equate to connecting to the Akash, as in the soul's individual library, DNA library, as I like to call it. So you can, you know, if you want to answer a question, but you've got no actual knowledge where you've read any books or anything, or you want to learn something, or you want to be able to do something really well, and you want to tap into that source where you get the answers.
That's
the key is to raise the vibration with music or humour. There's lots of ways, but those would be the two ways I would use as a starting point, because they are kind of foolproof ways of being able to do that. And the other thing, the final thing that I would say, is to do the thing that gives you the most joy, that makes you feel good, and that is different that's so different across the board with people. Because if you do that, that will also raise your vibration and mean that you can connect to the source or the super consciousness. So that would be my final words on that.
Thank you very much, Nikki. Bidam Smart, your final thoughts.
I guess I'll start with awareness. So the key that everybody needs to work on or practice is awareness. Awareness of yourself, awareness of your own mind, awareness of your own thoughts, awareness of things that are happening around you, things that are living, things you see, perceive. Actually, when I was talking halfway through this thing, somebody connected to me, and I could sense it. I could feel it. Somebody was like trying to freaking make contact.
That was me.
That was you?
Yeah, that was me.
Okay. Well, it worked. I caught it. I was trying to figure out what the hell's going on. But anyway, so awareness, with that, all other things can come. Then never go to bed without a question on your mind. So that's something you can get when you wake up. And the more people practice it, and the more people expand their mind to focus on what that waking thought is, or what that waking thought dream was, it's kind of like a crowbar. You can wrench the brain open and get it used to actually giving it to you more easily. So over time, you become better at it. So I guess that's about my final thoughts. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, everybody on the panel tonight. And I'd like to remind the listeners of this show that it will be posted on the mindspanel.com website, and the audio will be aired on Minds Radio in the next couple of days. So thanks again, everybody on the panel tonight. Signosis, Gov Spiders, Melissa, Cartman One, and Bidam Smart. Thank you, and have a great night.
Thank you, Tech Lords.
Thank you, Tech Lords.
You too, Tech Lords.
Thanks, everybody.